Hello, everyone. My name is Zach McInnes. I'm with ISA and Teen, and thank you for joining us today for our amazing panel, Advice from Alumni, Taking Pride Abroad. So as you all know, it is June 7th. We are 1 week into Pride Month, our favorite month of the year. And to that end, we have a terrific panel here today full of diverse perspectives and experiences. And we're gonna have a great conversation about being LGBTQIA plus abroad. And so to start, I'll introduce myself. I'm from Austin, Texas, but I'm a graduate of Emmanuel College in Austin. Nope, that's not right. Emmanuel College in Boston, and I studied abroad in Mexico and Peru. My pronouns are he, him, his. And the first time I studied abroad was in Mexico, and that was the first time I was fully out as a gay man. And we also have Sarah Warren here, who I'd like to have introduce herself as well. She'll be moderating the chat, and we would love to see a vibrant and on fire chat today. So Sarah.
Hey y'all. I am also a regional director here. So I work with universities in Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee. I graduated from the University of Kentucky, and studying abroad in Germany was actually the first time I came out as well. So happy Pride Month. We're really excited to be here and chat with these alumni.
I didn't know we had that in common, Sarah. How amazing is that? Terrific. Well, but you guys didn't come to hear me and Sarah talk. You came to hear our amazing alumni talk. So I'd love for Andrew, Stephanie, and Sarah to introduce themselves. Andrew, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone, thanks so much for joining. My name is Andrew. My pronouns are he, him, his. I graduated from Guilford College in North Carolina in 2020, and I studied abroad during my junior year in Valparaiso, Chile. That was in the spring semester of 2019, and I was out as a gay man already before going abroad, and then was out while I was abroad as well. But happy to be here.
Awesome. We're happy to have you join us, Andrew. Thank you. Sarah, let's have you go next.
Hi, everyone. Happy Pride. Very happy to be here. Thank you to ISA for the invitation. My name is Sarah Batdorf, pronouns she, her. I am a 2018 graduate of Bridgewater College in Virginia, and I studied abroad in Meknes, Morocco in the fall semester of 2016, which is a lot longer ago than I'd like to admit. I was not explicitly out while in Morocco, and yeah, I don't know if I'm explicitly out anyway. I'm sort of like a, if you're not trying to date me, it's not your business sort of thing. But yes.
We love it. Well, Sarah, you don't want to know what year it was when I studied abroad, so thank you for sharing that. We're happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And Stephanie, let's have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Again, thanks, as everyone has said, thank you so much for coming to join us today. So my name is Stephanie Kreutz, pronouns she, her, hers, and I studied abroad in 2018 in the fall semester in Spain, in Malaga. It's on the southern coast. And in 2021, then I graduated with my undergrad from the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. It's a very small city. And I wasn't actually, I was still kind of figuring out some elements of my identity back when I did go abroad. But one part of asexuality that I'd already known since high school. So I was pretty open about that.
Terrific. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here. And I just want to say this panel, I mean, we have Latin America represented, we have Africa, and we have Europe. A fourth panel member, unfortunately, couldn't be here today, but she studied abroad in New Zealand. So together we cover a lot of different continents. So this panel is going to kind of take place in two parts. First, we're going to talk about kind of general advice related to study abroad, and then we're going to dive into some identity issues. So we're going to talk about, choosing your program, things like location, academics, budgetary considerations, and then talk to alumni. So let's start with location. And Stephanie, let's start with you. So when deciding on where you want to go abroad, what did you take time to consider? Do you have a destination in mind, or are you open to options? What type of experiences are you looking for? Do you have any specific goals to accomplish? Just kidding, these aren't actually questions. Bear with me, everybody. And academics are another important consideration. So they're just as important as where you'll be studying abroad is what you'll be studying abroad. And so think about things like, will you focus on your major, your minor, electives, or are you more interested in experiential components like internships, service learning, or even research abroad? If you're looking for a few courses on gender roles and norms, you may want to consider Meknes, Morocco, as I know both Sarahs on this call can attest to. And Tokyo, Japan has some great courses related to gender identity as well, as in addition to the University of Westminster in London. And as always, talk with your academic advisor and your study abroad office as well. Now, lastly, let's talk about budgeting for your time abroad. Are you an out-of-state student? Going abroad may be cheaper than going home. Do you already use financial aid? Check with your financial aid office to see if you can apply that abroad. Same goes for scholarships as well. And now let's turn to our alumni for some advice. So Andrew, what motivated you to study abroad?
Yeah, so going into undergrad, I knew that study abroad was something that I wanted to do. Kind of the main reason was really like out of convenience and knowing that like this is an opportunity now where as part of what I'm already working on with my undergrad experience and my degree, I can go abroad and I can live in another country. And it's like really rare that most of us will get that chance in our lifetime to be able to travel and live abroad just as part of what's already going on. And so, you know, really it's in a lot of ways the easiest time to live abroad. So that was a really big component of it for me. And I was also a Spanish major at Guilford. So study abroad was required for Spanish majors, but, you know, I knew I wanted to go abroad anyway. But, you know, Chile really interested me because I actually took a class where he talked a lot about Chile and read, you know, some Chilean literature. And so it was just something that I was really interested in.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And let's go down to Stephanie. What motivated you to choose Malaga?
Yeah, so first, I was also, like Andrew, a Spanish major in undergrad. It was great. So going to Spain very much, I don't know, I'd always wanted to go to Europe. I mean, the list of locations that I want to travel to grows by the day. But that was one location that I'd always wanted to travel to ever since learning about it, taking classes in high school where we'd learned about, you know, Spanish cities, things like that. The reason why I chose Malaga was I actually didn't do a whole lot of research before even choosing the program. A friend of mine in high school was from Malaga, so I wanted to see where he was from. That was the extent of the decision-making process. So I highly recommend everyone else do a little bit more research ahead of time, but things like that can really help you determine, at least narrow down list of locations that you're interested in. You know, going on Instagram and seeing, you know, random pictures from different places can help, you know, but kind of narrowing down the field there. But just studying abroad in general, like Andrew said, there's no easier or cheaper way to travel than as an undergrad student. You know, getting credits still to work towards graduation and still going abroad for an extended amount of time. You know, doing a homestay with my experience, it's very immersive. So it was something I always wanted to do, but then I didn't really know, but it would definitely inspire my career field in international education after that. So I've been very fortunate.
I was about to say Stephanie is of the mindset as myself sometimes is do as I say, not as I do, professional. And so let's shift over to you, Sarah. What motivated you to study abroad and why did you choose Morocco?
Yeah, so similar to Andrew, the program at my college for global studies, which is international relations, I don't know if it was explicitly required to study abroad, but it was very strongly encouraged. I studied French and, you know, I had been to France before, beautiful country, but I sort of had the mindset of like, well, like it's Europe. Like anywhere you go in Europe, it's going to be very European. Where can I go that I can use my French and still have, you know, a little more of a new experience? And Morocco was top of the list. It was definitely the best choice I ever made. You know, even in hindsight, I feel like if I'd gone to France, my French would have been significantly better, probably. I'd probably still be fluent. But if I had to go back and do everything again, I'd still choose Morocco. And, you know, I know both Andrew and Stephanie have said this, but there truly is no easier time to go abroad. You know, I have been graduated now for 4 years. And I have not been out of the country since I got back from Morocco, you know, not for lack of trying, but when you're part of the workforce, it is a lot harder to get the time off, not even just the money, but just the time off to go to any place for any meaningful amount of time, especially if it is somewhere that's a little farther away to get to. So, you know, we will beat that point to death. It really is the best time to go. And there are scholarships, I'm sure at some of your universities, there are scholarships specifically for people going abroad.
It's so true. You know, what we find is that, you know, when you're an adult in the workforce, like you can visit places, you know, stay for a week, stay for a weekend, maybe even 2 weeks, but you won't have the chance to live somewhere like the four of us have and really become part of a place and part of a culture. So I really like the way you put that, Sarah. Thank you. The next question is related to preparation. How did you prepare for your program abroad? And we'll start with you, Stephanie.
So as far as preparation goes, definitely I, again, didn't do a whole lot of that besides just studying Spanish and taking classes in school, and then working obviously with my study abroad office to get all the paperwork and everything out of the way. But as far as doing research into the country itself, apart from anything that I learned in my own classes, I didn't actually do a whole lot of research into the region around. Every once in a while, I would see something related to Malaga. You know, oddly enough, I feel like our computers listen to us, that, you know, it knew that I was going to Malaga. And so it would send me things like the ads would pop up relating to, oh, Picasso was from Malaga, you know, things like that. So things, you know, related. But to anyone wanting to go abroad, again, very much do as I say, not as I do. Definitely do a little bit more research into the places that you're going to be staying for 1 month, 2 months, a whole semester, academic year, anything like that, to really get to know not only the people that you'll be interacting with, but also some key locations that you want to try, you know, going to, restaurants, the attitudes of the people towards certain aspects of your identity, which, you know, we'll be talking about today. But just, yeah, look into things a little bit more than perhaps I did.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And do I spy an ISA Peru bag behind you, hanging from your wall?
Yes, one of the study abroad coordinator at the office here, he said, hey, I just went to NAFSA, come and pick out something. So
Love it.
I didn't have a
Love
World
it.
Strides thing, so now I do.
Very good. And Andrew, how did you prepare for study abroad in Chile?
Yeah, so definitely, you know, some of my own research in terms of, you know, there's a lot of really great information available, of course, on the internet. There's a lot of good books too, you know, that you can check out that are specific to whatever country or culture you're going to. And then ISA also provided like a lot of really helpful information through the kind of student portal that had, you know, information that was a little more specific to, okay, what about, you know, Valparaiso specifically, the city that I'm going to be staying in, and kind of what can you expect in terms of even just like logistics and kind of day-to-day really practical things. So that was really helpful as well. And then the biggest other thing I would say too is just like talking to people. Number one, like talking to people at Guilford who had done this program before me. That was really helpful to hear like from them about their experiences and like any advice and recommendations that they had for me. And then, you know, as it pertains to kind of queer identity as well, like talking to mentors or talking to, you know, people at your university university or at ISA who have experience, working with queer students who want to study abroad. That was also something that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a great answer. There are a lot of resources in that student portal and on the website by ISA as well. Your study abroad office as well is a wealth of resource. They may have some additional documents they can share with you and resources they can point out. Shelley and Nadine, who I believe are on the call, oversee our Alumni Ambassador Program, and they have many students on their list who may share similar identities or perspectives as you that they can connect you with. So another good resource that you can tap into there. And Sarah, how did you prepare?
Yeah, Andrew definitely touched on it. The ISA guides I found to be super helpful. I didn't listen to them in the sense that I still packed way too much clothing. I ended up leaving a lot of it there. You think you're going to need a lot more for 4 months than you actually do, especially if you buy clothes abroad. So if you're packing and it seems like a lot, it probably is. But yeah, just the list that they had there. And then in terms of academics, something that is really good to keep in mind, I think, is if you are at the point that you've decided on a country, try to get your classes figured out as soon as possible. Or if students at my university could not study abroad until junior year, but even like freshmen and sophomores, they're already looking ahead to their classes because there are certain classes that you can take abroad that may be a substitute for some of the general education requirements that you have. So as soon as you have an idea that you want to study abroad, be working with your advisor, be working with your study abroad advisor, and make sure that you're not, taking classes that you might be able to take abroad, so that you can really get the most out of your time.
Terrific. Great advice. And so we got a question from the chat that I love and I want to lift up. So how did your identity play into your selection of a study abroad program, if it did at all? Stephanie, would you like to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, all right. Personally, it didn't necessarily affect it all that much. At least in Spain itself, I'd already known this. It is a very progressive country, especially towards LGBTQ individuals as far as gender identity and sexuality. But for me personally, again, my outward identity and expression of self, it didn't really have any kind of effect on where I decided to go. My asexuality, it's just something where I told people, kind of like with Sarah, it's like, it's not really anything I necessarily choose to talk about a whole lot. Back then, now I do. I'm very vocal about it nowadays. But back then I didn't really. And as far as my bi romanticism, I was still kind of figuring that out at the time, so it didn't really play too much into that selection. But that is definitely something that can affect your choice of location, where you would like to go. Again, we'll probably talk more about that later, and I would love to hear what Sarah and Andrew have to say about it. But personally, it didn't really play too much of a factor.
Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, sort of in a similar vein with Stephanie. I will say, disclaimer, when I studied abroad, I did have hair. I still had short hair. It was a pixie cut, but I was not rocking a buzz cut. That was probably the biggest factor of my identity, actually. It was just being a woman in Morocco. I feel like I was a lot more aware of it, especially as a woman with short hair, which was not a traditional style for them there. It was hard to find people who could do a good haircut. But yeah, in terms of my queer identity, it wasn't really something that I focused on while I was studying abroad.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Andrew?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great question. So I think that it definitely played an impact in some ways. I mean, I kind of had Latin America and Spain to choose from. I knew, that Spain is very progressive in its views of sexuality and accepting queer people. And I knew that there was, kind of a lot of differences within Latin America. Some countries like Chile are really progressive, and other countries are, we could say, still working on it, maybe. And so, yeah, I think if Chile wasn't, and I didn't know going into it that Chile was as progressive as it is, then that would have made me kind of question, the idea of going there and maybe, lean more towards Spain. But kind of like Stephanie said, I do think it's a really important question. And I think that, there are so many really amazing places all over the world where queer people and queer students can study abroad and will be accepted for the most part. And so I would say if that's something that's really important to you, don't let go of that priority, because you can find something that's going to be a really amazing experience for you.
Beautifully put. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, even I don't have an excellent answer for that. I mean, I would say I chose to go to Mexico in part because I thought Enrique Iglesias was cute at the time. I later found out he was Spanish, so that was way off. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives there. And so our next question is about once you arrive in your host country, was it easy to make friends? And what was it like creating community abroad? And how did you make that community? And we'll start with you again, Andrew.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that it was actually really easy to make friends once I arrived. Probably even more so than I was expecting. Our program started out with kind of like an orientation stage in Santiago. So before we even got to our homestays, everyone who was there with ISA was all kind of staying together in different hotel rooms and stuff. And that orientation phase was just a great way to get settled and kind of get familiar with some new people before, you actually went to your homestay. So that was a really great opportunity to already go into Valparaiso, with some friends. And so that was really helpful too. Once we got there, being able to explore and just send a WhatsApp to, one of your new ISA friends, hey, you want to go walk around, or I saw this restaurant, do you want to go try it with me? So I think it was definitely easier than expected. And I think that definitely was a big part of the community that I found in Chile. I also was fortunate that my homestay, there were 5 Chilean students that were living there with me, along with my host family. It was a really big house. And so that was a really great way to kind of create a local community as well. And I would say, yeah, my advice would be kind of look for both, try to make some friends with ISA, but also don't be afraid to branch out and make some friends with local students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you go with a program like ISA, it's almost like a naturally built-in network. Think about your freshman year of college, when you're all kind of in the same position, in the same boat, and all together. But like Andrew said, it's really important to try to break out of that, just knowing ISA and other study abroad friends, because there's other local communities too, which can take a little bit more of an effort, but it's absolutely worth the payoff. And so how about you, Sarah? Can you comment on building community abroad?
Yeah, one of the things I really loved about ISA was what Andrew was talking about in terms of the sort of I don't know, we'll call it the transition into the country. My older sister studied abroad as well. She was in Ecuador through a different program. And from what I can remember, she was just kind of thrown into the deep end right off the bat. It was a lot harder for her to make friends. She came out of study abroad with a lot of really great friends. But I definitely feel like I was able to connect with the other ISA students more, because by the time we even got to our host city, we'd been together for probably 4 or 5 days already. We already had inside jokes, we already had stories. And I definitely that was such a huge part of it. And then I don't know if this is just a Morocco thing, I'm sure it's not, but we also had what were called the Friends of ISA. And one of our directors had a younger brother who was, one of the friends, and then his whole group of friends were also friends with all of the ISA students, and around the same age, and we just had a great time with them. They came on excursions with us. They introduced us to their friends. We would meet up in the city and go to cafes. A lot of them were involved in bands, so we would go to different cafes and go support them when they were doing performances. So honestly, if you can find one or two locals and just put yourself into their friend group, and just sort of trust them to introduce you to people, it worked for me. So
I love that. Yeah, that's great. Love it. Stephanie, community abroad.
Yeah, very much what everyone else has said already. I think being in ISA and part of an ISA study abroad program, again, just like Zach said, having a built-in community already there was very nice. Going through orientation together, meeting up in, we flew all into Madrid and meeting everyone at the hotel for the first time and having this whirlwind of activity, and visiting a couple of different locations around different cities on our way to Malaga. I think all of that just drew us really close together because, just like you said, it's very similar to a freshman orientation where everyone is in the same boat. We've all gone through kind of a chaotic, hectic experience of overseas flights, to then land in a new city, flying in by ourselves, not knowing anyone maybe from the same state, things like that. So I think that really drew everyone really close together. Not only that, then living in a homestay experience or living in residence halls or dorms, wherever you would end up staying, that's going to also create just a sense of community. I think personally, if I would have gone back and done things again, part of my research process that I should have done, really, if I'd done my due diligence, would be to look up some communities and clubs and groups, like maybe a conversation partner like group, or different interest groups in the city, so that I could have already known where to go to find these. Although I could have also looked on the flyers that were in and around the university, and then participated in some other events in that way if I'd been a little bit more active like that. But I think for me, just kind of getting situated, I'm very introverted naturally, so just the people that I had around me was enough of a community, I think, for me. But going back and doing things again, I probably would have done more, getting involved with the local community as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. In some ways, as members of the queer community, we're lucky, because wherever we go in the world, there are others like us, and it's just all about kind of seeking them out. And your resident directors from ISA and Teen can typically give great advice about, maybe this university has a really strong gay-straight alliance, and put you in touch with them. So don't hesitate to reach out to us as well if you're looking for that community abroad. And so, we've all touched on this a little bit, but now I want to talk about, differences in cultural norms. And as three superstars who have lived in different continents, let's talk about the difference in queer culture norms in each of your host cities. And we'll start with Stephanie, being in Europe, which is probably the most similar to here in the US, but not that similar.
Yes, so it is very comfortable. Granted, when I'd gone abroad, I was 19. I didn't really have too much of experience with queer community. Coming from, I was at a very small high school, and I'd already kind of started to connect some dots of, I'm a little different than a lot of people around me, coming from the Midwest as well. So, in a lot of ways, it was very different than what I'd experienced, but also I wasn't on the lookout for a queer community. I didn't really know what to look for. So everyone here who is kind of on this call right now, if you're already here, it means you're already thinking about being looking for a queer community and looking for these opportunities to explore your own identity abroad. So good on you. I did not. So I think for sure it was different going to Europe and seeing everything. People were a lot more open, I think, than what I was used to, but in a lot of ways it wasn't all that different. Going to Pride here in the States, people are very open and very comfortable with their own identities. It's very similar to that abroad. If anything, topless beaches, that would be kind of the big difference. But besides
that is a difference in cultural norms. Yes,
a little difference in cultural norms there, as far as openness in your own sexuality, outward presenting. But besides that, not really.
Yeah, I remember when I lived in Spain for the first time, it was before gay marriage was legal here in the U.S. and it was the first place I ever saw widespread two men holding hands in the street and two women kissing on the street, and I remember that being very powerful for me. So how about you, Andrew? Differences in cultural norms between here and Chile?
Yeah, so I think there were certainly some similarities, kind of in terms of like spaces that are for specifically for queer people, whether it's like the local gay bar or the local gay club, that kind of thing. And I think in a lot of ways that's kind of similar to at least some places in the US. I think that in terms of the community in Chile, it was maybe a bit more like underground or like a little bit harder to find. I remember this one specific occasion where it was during Pride Month, and I went out with a friend to this club, and it was like there was a Pride night that night, but we didn't know that in advance. Like, we had just gone to this club because we had been there before and we liked it. And then it was like, oh, it's Pride night. Like, that's so cool. But like, I didn't hear anything about this happening, so like you kind of have to have your ways in that sense. And I think like from a broader perspective culturally, one thing that I noticed as well is that it felt like Chileans were in general kind of maybe better about sort of just like being able to mind their own business in public than what I've experienced in the US, just in terms of like, oh, if you see, a same-sex couple holding hands, like that's fine, let people go about their lives. So that was something that I experienced as well.
Yeah, excellent. And I'll just echo that. If you ever have a chance to attend a Pride event abroad, I highly recommend it because it's different and sometimes a lot more fun than here in the US. And how about you, Sarah? I bet there was no differences between here and Morocco, right?
None at all. Morocco is a fascinating country because I have not been other places where it's so evidently like the old and the new coming together in one place. And for the most part, coming together rather seamlessly. There are definitely clashes in some places. Homosexuality is one of them. It is still technically illegal in Morocco. But it's also one of those things that it's sort of like, how enforced is it going to be? If you are a male making out with another male on the street, probably not a great idea. But there are probably also underground clubs where, it's sort of just like hush hush. So that's definitely one of the big parts. If you are really determined to study abroad in Morocco, I 100% support it. Definitely think you should go for it. Don't let it deter you. When I was going there, full disclosure, my queer identity was not something that was top of mind to me. That was not really my priority for studying abroad. And if it is something that's a priority for you, then maybe rethink Morocco and some of the other traditional societies. It is still very much a patriarchal society as well. It was very interesting because you would see grown men on the street, like holding hands with other grown men, but it was like not in like a gay way. It was just a very sort of like familiar way. So it's interesting sort of how they have that definition of it, where two presumably straight older men could just walk down the street holding hands. And that's just sort of the cultural thing. But the same thing would not be true if they were two gay men, even if people didn't necessarily know that. So yeah, very interesting country. Definitely worth a visit. I do think, you know, maybe compared to Chile and Malaga especially, you might want to think about what your priorities are for studying abroad, and just determine if Morocco is able to fit into those.
Stephanie, yes, please.
Just as a side note as well, as somebody who went on a 5-day trip to Morocco, because Malaga is literally like on the southern coast and you just take a quick ferry ride to Morocco, and that was one of the additional excursions that you could choose to go on. 100% would recommend anyone who would like to go definitely visit. It was the first time I'd ever been to Africa, and it was a wonderful experience going to see this beautiful country. It very different. Definitely going from the US to visit Spain, culture shock, and then going from Spain to Morocco, an additional culture shock. But it's very, very cool. So yes, highly recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just kind of echo what the three of you said, being aware that these types of norms are going to differ from country to country. I studied abroad, over 10 years ago now. And at the time here in the US, like heterosexual men and gay men typically would dress pretty differently, right? And so we would play the game, is he metrosexual or is he gay, right? And so things have evolved a bit since then. But just kind of, as queer people, we're inherently more observant of those types of things. And so just pay attention to your surroundings and see what you can observe. So the next question comes from the chat, right? So there are some study abroad advisors on the call. How would you all suggest that study abroad advisors more efficiently advise students with queer identities, either unknown or known, before going abroad? And Sarah, let's start with you.
Honestly, my advisor, we didn't talk about it at all. I'm not sure that she is still working for my college in that role, to be quite honest. But I think, it just, even the fact that we didn't talk about it at all is pretty glaringly obvious. You don't have to pry into a student's personal life in order to get those kinds of get that kind of information from them. And I think, probably having students who want to study abroad meet with like the diversity, equity, and inclusion advisor at your college, or having that be a meeting run by that person as well as the study abroad advisor. Because again, I did not consider my queer identity going into studying abroad at all. And in hindsight, I do have to ask myself, like, would I, because, I'm bisexual, biphobia is very real. Could I have, jump started my queer identity a bit more if I had gone to a country that was more accepting with people that, I didn't know, that I was meeting for the first time? Would I have been able to explore that identity more and maybe feel a little more secure in myself if I had decided that that was something that I was interested in? So just even starting to talk about it is definitely the big one, because that was not present for me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so Stephanie, as someone who is working in our field now, what do you wish your study abroad advisor had told you?
Well, I don't know necessarily what I would have hoped that he would have told me. Because looking back again in hindsight, at the time, it wasn't a huge area of emphasis for me, something of great importance. It was just, I had this place that I wanted to go to to take classes and to see the country itself. My own identity didn't really play a strong factor, as now probably it would a lot more. I'm a lot more cognizant of my own identity and facets of it and how they interact with my professional career, academic career, all of the good stuff. But something that I definitely tell my own students when I'm advising them, because I work in the study abroad office here at the university. Don't know if I mentioned that before. But I tell students, apart from asking their pronouns, which is always a very important thing when advising, but also just to ask if it is something that, I guess, their own identity, if they've done a lot of thought about it, and if it's something that's of a lot of importance to them. Also, certain aspects of their identity they may need to be comfortable I don't know how to say it, like minimizing depending on the location that they would like to go to. Just things like that. Just being comfortable, presenting a certain way where it's culturally more acceptable, things like that. You never want to tell somebody to go back in the closet, anything like that. But depending on the location that they're hoping to go to, sometimes that's just for their own safety and well-being, and just general comfort. Not that anyone would be outwardly aggressive towards somebody. Most places people are very welcoming, especially, to Americans, to outsiders, because they want to be able to share their culture in a very positive way. But still, you just want to be careful and in the best way possible, have the best kind of experience abroad. So I don't know, to be cognizant of all of that and be aware, and to ask, kind of like what Sarah was saying, have somebody from diversity inclusion, maybe perhaps in the meeting, or to send the student to that person, just if that's something that is of concern to them.
Yeah, absolutely. As professionals, we never want to assume the identities of people in our offices and meeting with us, right? Because that leads us into tricky territories. But we want to create a safe space for people to, disclose those identities to us if they want to. And so up to you, Andrew. What do you wish your study abroad advisor had told you, if anything?
Yeah, I think that something that comes to mind, which is not specific to my own experience with study abroad advising, but just sort of advice for advisors. That's ironic. But would just be that, like, if you're aware that you don't share an identity with a student, like, recognize that that's a limitation of your role, and also, like, name that, because hopefully you're an expert on this area, and you can provide a lot of really beneficial information, and you're not going to ever understand, like, what that student is going to be going through in that moment, once they're in the country, once they get back, throughout the whole process. So, like, find someone who does share that identity, who has been to that country or been to a similar country or gone through a similar situation, that you can put them in contact with. I would say that would be kind of like one of my biggest pieces of advice. And then also just, like, thinking about, and this might correspond a little bit better to the original question, Zach, but, like, think about, like, making a plan. So, like, okay, what if you get there and you do run into, like, some of these issues, like, do you have someone back at home that you can talk to? Like, are there mental health resources that are going to be available in the city that you're going to be in? Like, create those resources and, like, gather that support beforehand, so that students know that they have these things going into it, and they can feel more secure about that.
That's great. And Andrew, don't be shy about advising the advisors. Thank you for sharing that. Sarah, did I see your hand up down there?
I was just putting the clapping because when Andrew said,
It was a clap.
like,
Okay.
yeah, like, when the advisor, if they don't share an identity with a student, they need to recognize that is, it's something on them and not on the student. I just thought that was really great, because as students who aren't experienced with this, like the onus of responsibility should not be on you to try and anticipate the problems that you'll have. So I just thought the way that you said that, Andrew, was really good.
Agreed. All right, let's talk about identity and how we noticed this shift, or if we didn't notice a shift while we were abroad. So did you notice a shift in your identity, and how were you able to own your identity? And we'll start with Stephanie again with this one.
Okay, so for me, being a cisgender woman and, well, asexual, ace, and bi, a lot of that I didn't really fully a lot of that I did already know. The ace part, cis female part, that I already knew, and I was comfortable with. I had long hair at the time as well, so I don't know if I would have turned as many heads. I probably look a lot more queer than I did back then. But for sure, that the LGBTQ kind of side, the queer aspect of my identity, it wasn't as at the front of my mind as it would be now. I've mentioned this already in this talk, but I think that there was a shift in perspective, coming from the States and being fully aware of aspects like asexuality, like being a Jew, a Jewish woman, things like that, being part of the Midwest. Those were kind of areas of my identity that I had more forward. Whereas in Spain, all of a sudden, I was an English speaker. I was an American. Those were the areas that were more strongly emphasized, that I noticed a lot more. Again, depending on if I'd gone somewhere else, then different areas of my identity, like with Sarah going to Morocco and having woman and being like that, like feminine, and that would be a lot more of an area of emphasis. So yeah, it kind of just depends on the location. But for me, wasn't too much of a shift besides those areas.
And how about you, Sarah? Did you notice a shift in your identity?
Yeah, sort of like what Stephanie said, mine was more about like, in the States, I was a student, I was a daughter, and then you go abroad and suddenly like it mattered that I was American. It mattered that I was a woman who also had a haircut that was not traditionally like a woman's haircut there. But that was sort of the extent of it for me.
Terrific, thank you. And Andrew, how about you? Any shifts in your identity when you were in Chile?
Definitely, yeah. I think the experience of being abroad and like coming out to my friends in ISA and then coming out to the Chilean students that lived, in my house with me, and coming out to my host family, and then finding acceptance there with all of those groups, that made me kind of like more confident and more secure in my queer identity. And so when I got back from Chile, I felt more confident and more comfortable to like explore my identity further, and kind of, express myself in a way that felt more true to who I was. And, that looked like a lot of different things, but even in, just like the way that I dressed, and like feeling like, I didn't have to dress to match, any specific like idea or image or anything like that. So I think that, a lot of people talk about this kind of confidence boost that they get after studying abroad, because, you have to navigate some challenging things. And it's like, okay, if I could do that in this other country, in this other culture, in this other society, then I can definitely do it, now that I'm back in the US. And I think that for queer people that, the payoff is maybe even more significant for us.
I could not have said that better myself. Thank you for that, Andrew. That was a great answer. What else should we ask? So What is one thing you wish you knew before you left for study abroad relating to LGBTQIA matters abroad? Sarah, let's start with you.
At the bare minimum, you should probably know if it's illegal in the country you're going to. Yeah, I'm not sure that I even looked that up, to be honest. So, bottom of the barrel, is it illegal?
Yes, the legal framework abroad is definitely important. That's a great answer. How about you, Stephanie? Anything you wish you knew?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna pop a link in the chat here from EqualDex, which is a site here that you can look up from a country to country basis on, the state of, like Sarah was saying, legality and different areas, not only of if, let's say, very basic gay marriage or even homosexuality or gay adoption or gender identity. Things like that, different perspectives, but also not just the legal kind of side of things, but also opinions of the people in the country. I mentioned much earlier in the talk here, but something that is very important is to not only look at the legality of queerness, but also how it's perceived in perhaps not just the big cities like here in the States. Bigger cities, or you're going to have a lot more of acceptance and just generally acceptance and I don't want to say tolerance, but appreciation and respect for queer identities. Whereas in smaller cities or smaller towns, you may face different opinions. So it's very important to look up and do some research into the city that you're going to be staying in. What are common attitudes towards different queer identities, especially in how you present yourself. So that's something definitely that I wish I would have done more research into.
Terrific, thank you. And Andrew.
Yeah, I wish I had known about like just the different fun events that were planned for Pride Month in Chile. Because like I said, I accidentally stumbled into one, but I know that there were lots of others, and especially, Valparaiso is a big city, but Santiago, the capital, is just like a short, 45-minute bus ride away. And so, knowing some of the events that were happening there ahead of time, being able to like plan a trip out there, that would have been fun.
And then, so our final question for the panel, and then we'll give you guys, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
Just real quick as well, kind of going along with Andrew, definitely not only looking up events, but also if there is a queer community in the area that you will be staying, look up where to find them, because that is something I did not do, and I really wish that I had. So that's all. Yes, continuing.
Good advice. Yes, thank you. So our final question for this wonderful panel is, what was it for you? It is in quotes. When you realized you were doing the thing. Andrew, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. This is a funny moment, but I think it was when I finally got my phone to work in Chile, because I had so many difficulties with like different SIM cards, and I bought different SIM cards from different providers, and I tried to set them up, and then like I would go, like I literally, like, free time that I had for the first like 2 months I was in Chile, I spent trying to work on my phone. So I like went to the store, and they told me to call like tech support from the store. So I did that, and then like I just had this rude woman on the phone who like was not very patient with me not being able to understand her super well, and then she like ended up hanging up on me, and I got really frustrated. But then there was this really nice woman in the store who helped me out, and she did something in my phone settings to make it finally work, and that felt amazing. And I was like, I did it. I made my phone work.
Adapt, improvise, and overcome. Yeah, phones are always hard abroad. Sarah, how about you? What was your it moment?
I I'm not sure if there's anything really like specific, but I think it was probably like about a month into the whole experience when, you know, I can find my way to like my favorite frozen yogurt shop without having to look up the directions, and like I can get to the marketplace and like find this specific stall that I was looking for. You know, I feel comfortable enough that I can go order some snails off the side of the road in Morocco, which snails are very good if you haven't tried them. They're very good. Yeah, just the idea of like it sinks in that you're like, oh, you know, like I'm a visitor, but I'm not a tourist anymore. Like I've been here long enough that you've sort of passed out of like the typical tourist role, and you get to sort of experience daily life there a little bit more than is usually granted to people. And for me, that was probably about a month into the experience.
Yeah, I love it when you're able to build like your own routine. I remember seeing
Yeah.
the same old lady on the metro with her little dog every day. I'm like, okay, I'm a local here now. How about you, Stephanie?
I love that. So really the first thing that came to my mind, even though I love what Sarah was saying about building a routine, and when you feel like you're not just here for a short, blip of time, but like you're actually living in the country. That's what study abroad is all about. I definitely had several of those moments, being on the bus every day, and going to classes and things like that, having some kind of routine, being called my name from the cafe that I always went to in between classes almost every day. They got to know me, I got to know them. It was a great time. But I think the first thing that came to my mind was a very negative or very positive experience followed by a very negative, stressful experience, again followed by a positive experience, all on the first time landing in Madrid. I had the first initial excitement of my phone now is in Spain chime. It says Madrid on it as I was landing in the airfield. And then I get off the plane, and then my luggage was sent elsewhere. And so I had to go, and it was so stressful. And it was sent, I think, to a whole different part of the airport. Anyway, I forgot all of the Spanish that I knew. I'd studied it for 7 years up to that point. Then I lost all of it. And so, trying to come up with the words that I needed, and then finally working through that, and I was like, it's my first hurdle, I've gotten through this, I'm alone, but I figured it out, and that it just starts from there. So that was first thing.
Terrific. So both of you, Andrew and Stephanie, mentioned a challenging situation which you ultimately turned into a positive. So I love that. Thank you guys again. This has been a terrific panel. You guys did an awesome job. So appreciate your stories, your perspectives, and your thoughts. With that, I think we can wrap up this webinar right on time.
Great. Thank you
Awesome.
for having me. If anybody wants to go to Morocco, hit me up. I would love to talk about it.